and it's really wonderful. Okay, so it's recording now. So we're on the chapter of dealing with anger, and for those who are listening on the recording, this is coming from Perth today. So the bricks behind me are from Jhana Grove Retreat Centre. It seems my connection's a little bit in and out, so sometimes it might be harder to hear me. Not sure what I can do about that, except keep going anyway. And if it's too difficult to follow, then feel free to give up, but be patient if you can. And we can follow the book. So today we're starting on page 63. And I think we'll just get straight into it because we're a little bit late beginning today. So let's go for it. And please do raise your hand at any time. If it's a good place to pause, then we'll come to you. If not, we'll come to you in the little break when I stop reading. And anyway, along the way, I'll pause and ask for any comments or questions to be raised. I would really love for this day in particular to be more of a discussion, because I have been quite busy meeting with people here that I haven't seen for a very long time. And it's just really nice to hear different people's perspectives and to hear a little bit about your lives and how these teachings are relating to you, or how you are maybe considering or already applying these things. So it would be really nice to have a little bit of a discussion. I think I'm also still a bit jet lagged, so please forgive me if I'm a little bit slow. So just to encourage me before we continue, can you hear me kind of okay? Yeah, good. All right, that's good. Here we go. So we're on page 63 for those who have the book. And if you don't worry at all, because I will be reading it out. It's also, if you have the suttas, this excerpt is from Majjhima Nikaya number 145. And in this book, it's titled Punna's Courageous Spirit. So it begins here. The Buddha said to the monk Punna, "Now that I've given you this brief advice, in which country will you dwell?" And we'll have to go back to the whole sutta to find out which advice the Buddha has given him. But the point in this excerpt here is to see if he's ready to go off alone from the Buddha and practice the teachings that he's received. So then Punna says, "Bante," that means venerable, "I'm going to dwell in the Sunaparanta country." And the Buddha says, "Punna, the people of Suraparanta are fierce and rough. If they abuse and threaten you, what will you think then?" "Bante, if the people of Sunaparanta abuse and threaten me, then I shall think, these people of Sunaparanta are kind, truly kind, in that they did not give me a blow with the fist. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One." So you see how he's turning it around. So even though they are actually abusing and threatening him, he's actually looking on the very bright side and considering how much worse it could really be. So then the Buddha says, "But Punna, if the people of Suraparanta do give you a blow with the fist, what will you think then?" "Bante, if the people of Sunaparanta do give me a blow with the fist, then I shall think, these people of Sunaparanta are kind, truly kind, in that they did not give me a blow with a clod. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One." "But Punna, if the people of Sunaparanta do give you a blow with a clod, what will you think then?" "Bante, if the people of Sunaparanta do give me a blow with a clod, then I shall think, these people of Suraparanta are kind, truly kind, in that they did not give me a blow with a stick. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One." So it's getting worse and worse, huh? "Bante, if the people..." Oh, we read that bit. Okay. "But Punna, if the people of Suraparanta do give you a blow with a stick, what will you think then? Bhante, if the people of Sanaparanta do give me a blow with a stick, then I shall think, these people of Sanaparanta are kind, truly kind, in that they did not give me a blow with a knife. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One. But Punna, if the people of Sanaparanta do give you a blow with a knife, what will you think then? Bhante, if the people of Sanaparanta do give me a blow with a knife, then I shall think, these people of Sanaparanta are kind, truly kind, in that they've not taken my life with a sharp knife. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One. Wow. Could you go this far? Would it be a good idea? Okay, I'll carry on to the bitter end and then we can have some discussion. But Punna, if the people of Sanaparanta do take your life with sharp knife, then what will you think? Bhante, if the people of Sanaparanta do take my life with a sharp knife, then I shall think, they have been disciples of the Blessed One who, being humiliated and disgusted by this body and by life, sought to have their lives deprived by the knife. But I have had my life deprived by the knife without seeking for it. Then I shall think thus, Blessed One. Then I shall think thus, Sublime One. Good, Punna, good. Oh, good, Punna. Possessing such self-control and peacefulness, you will be able to dwell in the Sanaparanta country. Now, Punna, it is time to do as you think fit. Then, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words, the Venerable Punna rose from his seat, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, departed, keeping him on his right. He then set his resting place in order, took his bowl and outer robe, and set out to wander towards the Sanaparanta country. Wandering by stages, he eventually arrived in the Sanaparanta country, and there he lived. Then, during that reigns period, the Venerable Punna established 500 men lay followers and 500 women lay followers in the practice. And he himself realized the 3 clear knowledges. On a later occasion, he attained final Nibbana. Wow. So this is very interesting in different ways, right? Probably if it wasn't in the book coming up now, I might not read it. I might not choose to read it out. But the interesting thing is that sometimes in the Buddha's teachings, there's a hidden message. And sometimes we want to kind of skip things because it sounds a little bit like dangerous, or it sounds as though it could be misinterpreted to some extent. And yet I think it's a shame to do that outright, to reject something outright, because here there is obviously a very deep message. And I think we can look at it in many different ways. Firstly, I guess I would like to say, I'll read out Manori's comment. She says, I think Ven Punna had improved his metta quality to a high level, way above the mere mortal that I am. And that's really true. And that's why the Buddha actually praises him for having such self-control and peacefulness. And in a way, it's reminding me of that other sutta that's quite extreme called the simile of the saw, which I think we've had maybe last week or in a previous week in this chapter on dealing with anger. And it's similar in the sense that in neither case is the Buddha actually recommending that somebody go into such a situation. Okay, I think that's really important to make clear, first of all. He's not actually saying it's part of the practice to test yourself out by purposely putting your life in danger. That's not the teaching here, right? Because the Buddha's teaching about harmlessness, and one of the things he recommends over and above everything is spiritual friendship, association with the wise. Yeah, he says this is the whole of the holy life. And also sapaya, which means conducive conditions, okay? And conducive conditions normally means any place that you find helps your wholesome qualities to increase and the unwholesome qualities or mental states or thought patterns to decrease. So that means it might not be the same place for everyone, right? Which is why we need lots of different monasteries, including bhikkhuni monasteries. You know, I might thrive in one place and not in another. You might thrive in a place that's, you know, welcoming to people of all genders or all colors, and not in another, which is maybe not so welcoming. Yeah. One person may thrive with a teacher, maybe who teaches the Mahasi practice. Another person may thrive in a place where no particular practice is offered, but you're able to practice whatever appeals to you. Another person might thrive in a place with a very strong structure. Another might want more flexibility, more of a kind of free structure that you can find your own rhythm within. Yeah. Some people might enjoy a hot climate, others might enjoy a cooler climate. So what is conducive to one is not necessarily conducive to another. And clearly in this case, the Venerable Punna wanted to go somewhere that he knew and the Buddha advised him could be rough, could be very rough, you know, to the point that there could be a likelihood of him being attacked. And the Buddha wanted to test him out. And I find this part interesting because he's not actually testing him out based on whether or not he may risk his life physically. He's more testing him out on whether he's mentally able to deal with such context. And in a similar way to the simile of the saw, I think this points to our true well-being being less about physical conditions than about the effect of conditions on our mental state. Yeah, this could be one way of interpreting this. That even if you are attacked, if in that context you're able to maintain a very peaceful mind of loving kindness, of forgiveness, of equanimity, of self-control, as he says here, then you might not really suffer much harm. Yeah. And I think also in this sutta, it seems as though the Venerable Punna probably thought that there might be some advantage for the people of that place if they would receive the teachings of the Dhamma, so much so that he was willing to risk his own safety to a degree. Perhaps you could also say that he wasn't risking his safety because he knew that he could handle any situation with loving kindness, and that was pointing towards the power of loving kindness to bring about a change of heart. Mm-hmm. So these are just some of my reflections, but I can see that Christina has her hand up, and I would really love to hear from all of you, because I do think this is a teaching that could have quite a lot to draw out from. And also there might be things to criticize here. So please feel free to express whatever you wish. It's not that there's a wrong or a right. So
I'll ask Christina to unmute.
Yeah, I think it's very, in many ways, very related to everyday life. I mean, something I've been working on recently that I find quite difficult is being mindful and tuned into moments of ill will in myself, and dealing with that in various ways. And in some ways, this teaching is reminding me a little bit of the work I've been trying to do within myself around ill will, because what I've noticed is my ill will pricks up when I feel or I notice, or it might be a complete misinterpretation on my part, but I perceive some sort of threat, and it might be a real subtle threat, and usually it is quite subtle. You know, it's not someone physically threatening me, but it might be in my work setting. Someone just makes a comment or something subtle that, you know, I perceive as a threat. So yeah, I'm liking this because it's intersecting nicely with some of the thinking I've been doing lately around ill will. And I think most of us, a lot of the time, are going into circumstances, into countries or metaphorical countries that are hostile. I mean, every day I get on public transport, in some ways I'm taking on the possibility of some, just being out in public, being out in the world, it's not necessarily a safe place. So yeah, I think there's a lot in this. So yeah, I'll let other people speak. I won't carry on for too long on that, but yeah, I'm thinking ill will connects nicely with this. Yeah, and it does feel to have very practical day-to-day application in this culture, in this point in time.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a really good point. Well, several really good points there. And I love how you brought that back to, the things that you're working with in your daily life. Absolutely. It's interesting. It resonates to me as well, because sometimes I have this fear of rejection, and then if, say, somebody who I really depend on for, I don't know, self-worth, or I want to get some kind of sense that they value me and they don't quite greet me with enough warmth, then even that is a threat, right? That is a threat, even though it's not, like you say, physical, but the mental threat can sometimes be even more painful if it's triggering certain emotions in us. And then, of course, we don't feel full of metta, we kind of tend to get ill will. So wonderful. Yeah. And it's realistic, isn't it, that life is dangerous? We have, in Perth anyway, the coronavirus is spreading now. In the rest of the world, it's spread already and it's continuing. But certainly, this is also a kind of threat. It's like, how are you going to face that threat? Are you going to stay in? And, are you going to sort of pull back from life so that you're not able to benefit people in your workplace, or maybe even the people around you that do seem hostile? Sometimes if you just give a smile to someone on a train, the whole atmosphere changes. So it's great. I'm so glad that you brought that applicability out. Thank you, Christina.
We'll ask James to unmute.
Hello.
Hi, James.
Is it nice in Perth? Is it all sunny and stuff?
Yeah, it's quite hot. There's different aspects to heat because the sun's very strong. You can easily get burned. But it's been cooler. The wind's cooling off and there's a bit of rain recently.
Oh, lovely.
The British always have to do a weather report, isn't that true?
Yeah. It must be fabulous for you to be back.
It's wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Real, I would say.
So I like the fact that Sutta ends with him converting a whole load of people, but doesn't actually say that he ended up being punched, stabbed, abused, or in any way sort of like attacked. So I like to think that the only instruction relevant was that only if they abuse or threaten him, that he's given them loving kindness and a positive response and everything, and that was possibly enough to sort of nip any further escalation in the bud, And certainly something I intend to do. I ironically think of myself as both advantaged because I don't get a lot of hostility in my life. But on the other hand, I kind of wish I did a little bit just to have a bit of practice, you know what I mean? Because if these things come out of the blue, does that sound weird? Like you don't really know how you might deal with a situation until you face it. But if you are reading teachings like this and you have it in mind and you're at least practicing it on some level, then you are pre-configured, hopefully, that should an unpleasant situation arise, that you're not going to fly off the handle or everything. So yeah, I am confident.
At least it reminds us.
Exactly. And I think I said some weeks ago about with the one with the saw, about you chop the person's legs off and they're still not allowed to be annoyed about it, basically, to be very basic. Perhaps this is kind of the same thing. If you go into a situation thinking that, even if these people stab me to death, then, I'm going to try and raise some loving kindness, then it makes just being nice to someone who's just being a bit of an idiot to you that much easier, I don't know. It's not
puts
too
things in perspective, doesn't it?
That's it. Yeah, it does. It's yeah. Things could be a lot worse. They could be stabbing you rather than just calling you an idiot. Anyway, sorry, I'm not sure that's very useful, but
No, it's always extremely lovely to hear different people's reflections, because sometimes just pointing that out, it's almost stating the obvious, right? That it ends so beautifully, and yet it's so key to this whole passage. It kind of shows the purpose of why the Buddha taught like this, and why it was important to preserve such a teaching. So without me adding too much to that, let's go move on.
I will ask Hawk to unmute.
Yes, I actually have two questions. One of them is in the 7th verse. It says, one who being repelled, humiliated, and disgusted by the body and by life, have sought an assailant, but I have obtained this assailant without even a search. What does that mean?
Right, I think that this might be referring to some incidents that are scattered through the Pali Canon, where monks have actually sought to end their lives, like through suicide. And in here, when it says being humiliated and disgusted by the body and by life, I'm not sure whether that's referring to people who were mistakenly committing suicide, or whether this, because there were some incidents like that, at least in the commentaries. I think it's in the commentaries where the Buddha taught a large group of monks to look at the body as something to be repelled by, and they did that to such an extreme that they ended up committing suicide, which was obviously not his intention. And after that, he decided that instead he would teach them mindfulness of breathing. But there are some other very rare cases, and we have to be really careful here, where people who were fully enlightened already were nearing the end of their lives, and they were just suffering great pain. And they came to one of the Buddha's disciples, or even the Buddha himself, and actually said that they were going to use the knife. And this meant that they were basically tired of enduring that pain. They didn't see any other reason to kind of carry on, because they'd already fulfilled their highest purpose. And of course, when this happened, some of the Buddha's disciples were very perturbed and would run to the Buddha and say, what happened here? Did the person use the knife blamelessly? Meaning, did they use it with hate and anger, or did they use it through loving kindness and compassion without any defilement entering in? And in a couple of cases, the Buddha said, they actually used the knife blamelessly because they were already fully enlightened. And so there was basically no karma ensuing from that. So I think this is what it refers to. And again, it's one of those teachings that's not a suggestion, of course, but he's just obviously taking sense restraint and using that kind of way of flipping the thinking process, even the most, horrendous outcome, into something more positive, in order to protect his own mind here. So I think that's what it refers to.
Understood.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
My second question is, in the 7th, at the end of the 7th verse, it says, and he himself realized the 3 true knowledges. Does that mean he became Sotapanna at that point? And he wasn't a Sotapanna before that?
It could well mean that, but I'm going to actually check, because there's a little note in here, and hopefully I can find it in the back. The 3 true knowledges is usually referring, I think, to like the breaking of ignorance, which means an understanding of karma and rebirth, and also an end of the, actually, I thought it usually refers to an end of the asawas, but sometimes it refers to seeing the 4 Noble Truths. So here he's obviously not fully enlightened, because it says on a later occasion he attained final nibbana. So I'm going to have a look in the footnotes to see what it says there. So it's dealing with anger. Number 2. So yeah, the knowledge of one's own past lives, the knowledge of how others pass away and take rebirth or a new birth according to their karma, and the knowledge of the destruction of the influxes, that is arahatship. So it is confusing, because the 3 knowledges usually refer to full enlightenment. Okay, so I think what it must mean here is he became fully enlightened, and when it says on a later occasion attained final nibbana, that must mean parinibbana. So that must mean the khandhas cease, and he actually disappears from this world at the time of death. You can't really say an arahat dies, but an arahat attains parinibbana. I think that's what it means here.
Okay.
So yeah,
sense.
That's how close he would have been. And I guess we could infer from this sutta that he could have very easily already been an anagami, which would make sense given that he was able to, or he felt so confident in his ability to withstand all kinds of affronts and abuse. You know, because if somebody's an anagami, they're basically free from greed and aversion, any kind of ill will. So, so it seems he became an arahat. It's rather wonderful, isn't it?
Yes, thank you for that.
And it also says that, very welcome. It also says that he established 1,000 people, male and female. Notice how it's even in numbers. So, you know, clearly, probably it's not counted to the exact person, but it's definitely showing that, you know, the Buddha and his disciples taught equally to all, you know, not based on gender. It wasn't like, okay, you're women, you have to stay at the back, you're not going to get any teachings, you sit behind everyone else. You know, clearly they all had the same kind of level of guidance and input. So when it said that they became established, I would think that they could have perhaps become stream enterers. Normally, one who's established in the Dhamma is one who sees the Dhamma, at least breaks the delusion of a sense of self, sees the noble truths for the first time. So
I will ask Veronica to unmute.
Right. This may not be a very helpful suggestion because I can't remember it properly, but there are a couple of books written and they're published to do with the Amaravati Chithurst Forest Sangha set up in this country. I'm in UK. And there was a monk, an Ajahn, who went traveling to the northeast of India with a layperson with him. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names or not. I don't know if it's, but in the book.
I guess it's just Chito and Nick.
Yes. I thought somebody would know. Yes.
Fine.
No, I don't know. Do you remember the incident where they were actually in Bihar? They were actually set upon by robbers, and the layperson was terribly frightened. He fully recognizes that, but Ajahn Sutito actually just said, "I've just got my robes, guys," sort of thing. And they were astounded and didn't touch him. And that just shows that this sort of attitude can be realized in the world still now. And I just feel that's a sort of optimistic thing to think about. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, wonderful to refer to that story. It's reminded me of that. Yeah, I think, you're right. Ajahn Chito kind of surrendered to it, basically. I'm not sure he was free from fear, but as far as I remember the story, he actually sort of put his head down and sort of said, you know, do what you wish. And I'm sure that is completely confounding for somebody who really wants to inflict harm, because part of that anger is like it feeds off a buzz, doesn't it? It feeds off other anger. It feeds off the fight, so to speak. So if somebody's saying, well, do what you want with me, you know, it kind of deflates the whole thing. There's another story by someone, I don't know if I want to say their name because I wouldn't necessarily recommend their teachings, but they were actually confronted somewhere in America on the street, and somebody said, you know, I'm going to rob from you and just kill you, basically, right here. And they kind of had enough presence of mind to basically say, well, I don't think that's a good idea, you know, do it if you want to, but it's probably not the best thing for you to do. And they again got completely freaked out and just ran away, literally ran away from this woman. Yeah. So the trick is kind of having that presence of mind, huh? Okay, we'll come to you both quickly again before we move on.
I'll ask Christina to unmute.
The more I'm thinking about it, the more it's like an onion, the more complex it's seeming to me, because where I'm getting to now as we're talking is thinking about circumstances where, all right, so I think, you know, violence against women has been, you know, big issue in the public and international arena over the last many years, and it's an area that I work in, and so it's on my mind as well. And I'm thinking the complexity that I'm mulling over at the moment is there are times and circumstances where it's appropriate to push back in some sort of way and to say, this is not okay. And I'm not just thinking about issues to do with women, but racism, class, you know, all of those, you know, abuses of children, all of those kind of complexities. And I don't know where I'm going with this in my head, but I'm just flagging that this is a layer that's coming up for me now as we talk, and I'm just letting that sit there. I'm not looking for a resolution on this right now, but yeah, just putting it out there in the group really to say this is, I'm grappling with this now, yeah, as we talk, and I'll leave it at that. I don't think that's a simple answer to that one, but yeah, I think the demonstration of loving kindness is one element here, and how loving kindness manifests can be a very complex issue in and of itself. Yeah. All right, I'll shut up now.
Yes. No, thank you. That's so key. And it's as though you kind of came to your own, a deeper understanding through articulating that. It seemed that way, because I think that last point was really on track. You know, loving kindness, we assume, don't we, when we read this, that, oh, he must have just been very passive, you know, and kind of, you know, it would imply that he would just take whatever attack would come up to him, but it doesn't say that he did. It's talking about the control he had mentally, actually. And I do think that loving kindness and peacefulness can actually involve boundaries. Yeah, you can ask people to back off through fierce compassion or through, you know, firm loving kindness. Love, if loving kindness is related to the love of a mother, I mean, a mother sometimes has to like shout at the child and grab the child, you know, in their full body to bring them away, say, from a car, you know, that they're about to run out underneath. It doesn't, I don't think loving kindness and even peacefulness is necessarily passive. Perhaps it's more about the way we maintain our mind. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just also flagging another angle. I know that there was one instance in my life, like it's not kind of a common thing that I do, but there was one time that I intentionally did shout at somebody knowing that I wasn't angry at all. And it was almost like I just knew strong language was needed. And it came from a kind of sense of protectiveness and actually looking for that person's benefit. And this was actually in India when I was being kind of, yeah, flashed at. I remember we thought that there was nobody there, and I went into the sea, you know, there was nobody for miles and miles, and suddenly out of nowhere these two guys turned up, and I yelled at this guy to intimidate, and it was with compassion. It was with compassion, but it was also a sense of metta and self-protection. I mean, by protecting ourselves from other people's abuse, we also protect the abuser from perpetuating that abuse, right? So I don't know that it's necessarily always recommended to have to go to those measures, but sometimes I do think self-defense is needed. Yeah. Shell says non-violence is not a passive act either. Right, right. Non-violence doesn't mean only staying quiet, right? Protection over self-defense too. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else on that? Because that's a huge topic, but it'd be interesting to hear if anyone else wanted to contribute in any way. Shell?
I'll ask Shell to unmute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit about the non-violence. So I write and deliver non-violent direct action trainings for activists, and it's quite interesting talking about the principles of non-violence and that the language of self-defense over protection, because self-defense often means that there is an act that you do against someone that could engage with within some fight, whereas you're protecting yourself, you're doing that in a completely non-violent way. You're doing that to protect yourself and protect the other person, and within that you might still get hurt. So, you know, examples of self-defense could be just someone's hitting you and you kind of move your arm to get them off you, whereas protecting would be to cover you. And in that way, you know, you shock people when you protect yourself rather than you defend yourself. And that's quite a necessary thing, and I think we have to develop that within our minds as well. It's something that I've worked on, having experienced a lot of violence from security forces and the police even. And I found a couple of years ago, my mind was very much going into the violent realm and wishing such ill will against them, because I saw how badly people were getting hurt and how badly I was mentally getting hurt. I wasn't physically hurt, luckily, but it was about training my mind to be able to deal with that. And since then, I've engaged, unfortunately, with the police, and I've been almost surprised at what the practice of metta has done for me and how it's allowed me to stay composed in those situations. But also then it makes me feel even more compassion when I see the police say things that are just awful, quite frankly, that comes out of their mouths. And I feel, yeah, a sense of compassion that they're in that position and that they don't see what they're doing is actually harming themselves more so than harming me, actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I hadn't thought about that difference between self-protection and self-defense. It's quite interesting. So yeah, wonderful that you've had that training, and I guess the compassion comes around when you see that other people don't have those skills, right? They simply haven't received that kind of training. It's not that they are necessarily bad people, but how do we do this if we haven't had those skills? Yeah. Okay. So come back to Christina, and then and Kelly as well, and then we'll move on, maybe or maybe not. It's a really great discussion. I enjoy.
I'll ask Christina to unmute.
Shell, just picking up on Shell's comment, that got me thinking about dependent origination, because if you start, you were, Shell, making comment about horrific comments, things the police do. It's the same in Australia. We've got a big issue with police brutality here and so on. But when you start to think about where this behavior is coming from, and you start to think about the possibility that a whole lot of historical factors have brought them to this place, and in some ways at that moment they can't do any different. You start taking on that. For me, helps with the loving kindness and the metta, because then it opens me up to the compassionate side of it, because you can see their behaviors destructive to others and often to themselves, but in that moment they're compelled to go in that direction. And yeah, I just wanted to add that on to Shell's comment. She got me thinking about dependent origination, and yeah,
how strong that conditioning is. So Kelly, how do you unmute yourself?
I can unmute myself. Yes, I was just thinking about two different approaches to this. On the one hand, being kind of an aspirational thing in training the mind, and I found that metta practice then also really helps in kind of a day-to-day situation where these things might arise. And I'm quite lucky that, like other people have said, I don't have to worry about being attacked particularly, but dealing with people who are quite difficult, or who might hurt you with their words or things they expect of you. And so I was thinking about a kind of day-to-day practical things you could do in the moment that help you to deal with that situation when your mind isn't quite prepared yet to deal with it in the way that someone close to enlightenment might be. So, I mean, from my experience, I do find that taking a few breaths when something like that happens really, really helps. and also if there is time to reflect on what causes that person to do what they are doing that is harmful. And I just wonder whether there's any other suggestions you might have for that in the moment dealing with a situation like that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I think like you already pointed to, an ongoing practice of metta is really key, because this is actually dealing directly with the roots of aversion in the heart, in the mind. And I think, you know, unless we train ourselves in loving kindness and also in mindfulness, it's very, very difficult to suddenly bring it up on the spot. So I do think a regular practice is absolutely key. And then coming back to that practice of just grounding ourselves in our body time and again throughout the day, no matter how many times we can. You also mentioned about reflecting afterwards about what maybe caused that person to do what they did. I mean, for myself, I often find that I cannot really know, but even just, you know, presuming that there has been a cause, you know, and that, I mean, statistics show, don't they, that people who've been abused themselves are sometimes, I'm not sure actually how true this is, but often if somebody's abusive, there's been a history of trauma or abuse, you know, in their own lives. Certainly I've had experiences that way. So I think this is also really important, so that we don't like carry on that resentment and build it up after a particular incident's happened. Taking deep breaths is wonderful. I really feel, actually the next sutta kind of goes to what I would answer more or less, which is mindfulness of the body. Really embodying a sense of mindfulness, again, as much as possible throughout the day. And this is possible to the extent that we've taken the time to practice it, because for myself, if I manage to have a fairly continuous mindful awareness of the sensations in my body, then when somebody approaches me maybe with unpleasant words or even something that seems like a threat, I immediately feel it in my body, and the mindfulness goes to that place. That gives me a chance to develop equanimity or respond before I react. So to actually respond to the sensations, first of all, to actually acknowledge them and to say, okay, I mean, it's not like you have time to say it mentally, but just by being with those sensations, a certain amount of self-awareness is present there. And that can give us that space to pause before moving into unwholesome speech. I also find it kind of creates like a sort of force field, the metta as well. It can create a kind of sense of real groundedness, centeredness in the body, so that if people come at me with, say, maybe a difficult email or something like this, I can again take refuge just in that sense of groundedness, yeah, on the spot. So that's what I tend to do. I mean, traditionally, there are these kind of funny things that we pass down through British culture, like drink a glass of water, turn the other way, count to 10. I mean, it's not a bad thing if you are about to react by blowing up at somebody, you know, just actually walk away for a moment. You know, if you have the presence of mind to say to that person, at this moment, I'm struggling with that, just give me a moment to pause and I'll come back to you. It's probably unlikely you manage to get a whole sentence out, but sometimes you may, you know, you may be able to just say, I find that quite difficult at this moment, give me a moment, you know. Or yeah, just try to reflect on it after that. I don't know, I might, like I say, I'm still a little bit tired, so that might not be particularly structured way of answering, but if anybody else has any thoughts, please do share. There's two more people would also like to say something.
It's just a comment. I think the non-violence itself is a very complex area, because if I would get threatened or attacked or whatever, it's my decision to react or not. Yeah. So theoretically, I can say, okay, kill me. Yeah. But I can also, most likely in a reflex, try to attack the other one in self-defense. Venerable Sri Dhammananda, in his book, What Buddhists Believe, mentioned, okay, there are also Buddhist soldiers. I mean, soldiers and police, we know it's what the UK police is, but basically it has a reason, yeah, for a community. So what are they doing? And he says, well, a soldier, if in defense, not aggressive, does violent acts if needed, and then to do it not with bad intentions, almost like attacking with metta, yeah. But I think the complexity, and I don't expect a big answer. I think everybody has to decide. It's fine if I say I'm getting attacked, I don't react. But what do you do, let's say, if someone comes with a bomb, runs to a group, and you could theoretically either go on him and explode both of you before it goes to the other people, yeah? Or do you say, I'm not doing anything, and he runs to the group? So, no, it's very, I mean, that's an extreme bound. It's a much more complex, because then if I say non-violence causes more harm on the others. And I don't think there is an easy solution, but just it is a very complex thing. And like in politics, to be a theoretical person, and theoretically we know what is the correct thing, but a realo who has more complex in the society. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Great, yeah, great. So important actually to flag that. And I think, you know, specifically talking about the complexity, but also you flagged about the different intentions people may have. And that is the complexity, isn't it? I mean, the Buddha said that karma, which is basically intention, is so deep and so complex that it's almost unfathomable. And I think that's such an important point to raise, that it's not necessarily the act itself, but where you're coming from. And there will be a difference. I mean, I wouldn't imagine that it's good karma to kill anybody, even for good reason, but it's far less bad karma than killing somebody purely from out of hate. You know, it's much more gray, if you like. You know, there are different shades of gray. And I think sometimes in life, it isn't perfect. Life isn't perfect. Situations are, like you say, complex, you know, unexpected, and we might have to make a snap decision in a particular circumstance. Again, it just points at the importance of trying to purify intention, because then we're less likely to come from a place that's, you know, extremely damaging for us in the longer term at the level of karma, right? The result might be the same, that we lose our life, but, you know, what about rebirth? I mean, if we're willing to take that doctrine on faith, and we do consider that there could be rebirth based on our the quality of our intention in this life, the quality of our, you know, thought and speech, which is a direct outcome, speech and bodily action, which is a direct outcome of intention, then we would definitely do well to try and purify our mind. Certainly, yeah. And just trust, really, that if we are coming from a good place, sure, we may still do things that harm ourselves and others, but it is going to be minimized. You know, and that might be the best we can do. You know, we might be in some very difficult situations that we just have no control over. Yeah. We can't be black and white. Wonderful.
I'll ask Louise to unmute.
Thank you. I was thinking from a perspective of memories of past trauma that arise, that are kind of not sort of lingering, and whether I was interested in using that, well, they only did that to me, and whether that, use that, and whether that would be helpful. And then it got me on to thinking, actually, is metta enough to heal past trauma? And metta practice feels really, really important to me, and I feel I could do a lot more of it. But is metta enough to heal past trauma?
Very good question. Yeah, it's interesting because recently we've been having a few conversations like this where I am now about meditation, and whether meditation is enough. And I think it's a similar question because metta is obviously a type of meditation practice. And I really do think there's a scope for and a need for psychological support sometimes, whether that be trauma counseling or, you know, something like the 12-step program for addiction, or, you know, maybe dependent relationships, codependency, whatever may be the issue. And I would see it as just to make it very basic, that meditation is something that we do to purify the mind, when it's almost like it's one of the last stages in the gradual training that the Buddha lays out, right? So he starts the gradual training with some kind of sense of confidence. Having heard the Buddha's teaching, one develops confidence, and from that, you know, an understanding of suffering and the confidence that there's something we can do about that. And from that, he encourages us to practice virtue. So virtue is the foundation for the rest. From virtue, he talks about sense restraint, you know, which is a more refined way of purifying our conduct. And that's really looking at the mind, the way we use our mind, what we focus on. I mean, certainly in trauma counseling, as far as I understand, or at least in work that's being done on, what do they call it? The paravagal theory, parasympathetic nervous system. They talk about directing the mind towards signs that are soothing. So, for example, if you're in a sort of fight-flight state of mind, maybe triggered by past trauma, like anxiety, you want to run, you want to flee, you can start to calm down the nervous system by, for example, focusing on a beautiful flower, looking up at the sky, hearing the sound of birds. And, you know, they call that a glimmer. It's like just a moment that breaks that kind of response. And then it can move on to a glow, which is when you're able to hold that perception for like 30 seconds or something like that. And it's just a way for the nervous system to start to calm down. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert in any particular field of counseling, or especially trauma counseling, but I really think there's some types of karma, or what I mean by karma is things we have to work with in this context, you know, not that trauma is your fault. Say there's been trauma in the past and you have this like very difficult emotions or trauma to deal with as a result of that. It might need specialist attention. You know, it's as if there's like parts of the practice that are quite smooth, but then other parts of the mental landscape, if you like, that come up and they're very contracted and rocky and, you know, compacted, and they need gently prizing apart with the help of experts who are well versed in that. So I do really think that you know, metta is a great start, but some people are not able to practice metta straight out. You know, they need to actually unpack a little bit of their past and maybe learn to see it through different eyes. You know, maybe do some body work, you know, some release that can come through the body. Things like yoga, you know, there are so many different approaches, but I think we have to be clear that these are part of sort of a gradual system of training, and there's a kind of whole spectrum, and meditation is somewhere towards, you know, the later part of that. So I don't know if that gives a little bit of an answer to that. Is that at all helpful, or is that sort of what you were trying to ask about? Yeah, please do go if you need to go. That's absolutely fine. I just want to read out one more thing. Is that okay, Louise? Is there anything else I'm going to read out Shell's comment because it relates actually to Gunther's last comment. Well, we still have that in our mind. So Gunther, you were talking about the complexity, right? And about something about if you're going to be attacked by a suicide bomber. So Shell's saying, doing nothing is being passive. The principle of non-violence is an act. So your example of standing by and letting it happen is not being violent. Is being violent, not non-violent, right? So actually letting something happen is the violence. That's really interesting because that sort of also relates to this idea of being complicit unless we speak out, say, against racism, right? I mean, if somebody's being attacked due to their race, you know, or suffering like abuse in some way, and we just stand by and let it happen. That's violence. This is really good. Non-violence would be the act of jumping on the person with the bomb to protect others. And therefore, by not using an act of protection, you could actually be being violent. Yeah. Amazing. So I guess that in a way depends on how active your compassion has become, because it's one thing to sort of talk about love and kindness and compassion, but how do we put it into action? And again, like you said, Gunter, it's kind of a choice and yet not really a choice. But I don't think we should judge others as to where they are on the path and to the choices or ways we're conditioned when that moment comes. Yeah. We do the best we can, right? And it's really interesting to have that perspective. I appreciate that a lot, Shel. Yeah. We also have to look at all of this in the Buddhist context and see how that sits with us. And it's so individual. I love this about the Buddhist path. You know, he didn't say there's one way for everybody. I mean, obviously the basic principles are there, but the way that manifests is really up to us. We have to apply our own wisdom and understanding. And always be willing to learn, because we may think we've got it now. We know what we do, we're right on track, but that might change as we mature. So I'll just come back to Christina one last time, and then I think we're almost done today. It's a really great discussion to have.
Sorry, this is back to Louise, for Louise's benefit. I'm a psychologist and I work with trauma, and I work with a lot of post-traumatic stress disordered people, veterans of war and so on. And we, I just wanted, it's the interventions are varied and complex depending on the nature of the trauma, but in recent years especially, we've been using a lot of meditation techniques to great benefit with people experiencing trauma. But if the trauma is severe, these things do need to occur within the context of a complex kind of therapeutic intervention. But it's very interesting that meditation and breath meditation and reframing and a lot of the principles that Buddhists use, we've been finding through research to be of enormous benefit. But yeah, I just wanted to add that for Louise's benefit there, Louise.
Thank you. And I'm sure that's for everyone's benefit, including my own. So yeah, really important to recognise that meditation is also being integrated into therapeutic approaches. Yeah, so important. And I guess in small amounts, right? Maybe especially with those who have more severe traumas, that we don't go straight into like 6 hours of sitting, but just to bring that awareness in gradually and gently. Would that be the case? I don't know if you can unmute.
Yeah, and that's why depending on the severity of the trauma, initially meditation and some of these mindfulness techniques could exacerbate trauma. That's why, yeah, so that's what, depending on the extent of it. For instance, rape victims can respond very badly to mindfulness of the body and certain parts of the body. Yeah, so yeah, in some things need to be done really carefully and at certain points in time, depending on the circumstances. But yeah, so yeah.
And it seems as well that in that case, it would be very much a matter of relating one-to-one with the client, right? So you'd have that personal support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. Wow. I feel like it was so rich today in terms of contributions and really much to learn. So thank you, everybody. And please do leave if you need to. That's absolutely fine. And I would like to invite who to say a few words to it.
Yeah.
And then I will tell you what the next sessions are going to be.
Thank you. Talking a lot today, so I keep it short. As you might most likely know, all these sessions are done by Venerable Canda with a lot of matter and on a donation basis. If you feel like and can, consider donating to www.anukampaproject.org/donate to support Venerable Canda and his work to establish the first Theravada Bhikkhuni order in the UK. And thank you very much. I think it was a very, very interesting session today. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for contributing. I want to flag that the co-hosts also spoke, which you're always very, very welcome to do, and it's really wonderful to hear from both Kelly and from you, Gunther. So certainly you haven't been speaking too much at all. In fact, you have a what's it called? A deficit to fill. So very good. It seems like our numbers increased as the session went on. I think maybe the time difference, unfortunately, confused some of you. So I noticed Diana came at the end, but that's because you just woke up. Oh, well, at least you get to see us, Diana, and we get to see you as well, which is lovely. So, yeah, we're going to have these sutta classes for the next couple of weeks as well. So they'll also be on for most of us, Sunday. At 9:45 a.m. UK time. That's probably 10:45 a.m. in the rest of Europe or Western Europe, and that is at 4:45 in Perth. And I have no idea, I'm sorry, what that would be in the west of America. Yeah, UK time has moved an hour forward, so I'll be in sync with you all. And also metta on a Saturday. So we had a metta meditation yesterday, and that is at 9 a.m. on a Saturday for the next couple of weeks. So you get me twice a week for the next 2, and after that the meditation sessions continue, the chanting session continues with Rennie and then with Minori, I understand. Is that right? Minori, thank you very much. I'm guessing that's correct. And I don't know if my connection is lagging here. And also we have guest bhikkhunis almost twice or 3 times a month. Basically every Sunday evening there'll be something, either with a guest bhikkhuni or with a talk that's recorded and a Dhamma discussion after that. So every Sunday throughout the next few months while I'm on retreat, I'm still catching up with friends over here and enjoying connecting with the community. I'm hoping Christina's going to come visit. I'm here at Bodhinyana Monastery, Serpentine, so we can be in touch about that. I'm not here probably next weekend, but the one after I will be. I might be in the city next weekend. Anyway, so hopefully there'll be lots of Dhamma offerings for you to enjoy. So we're almost not quite out of time. So I don't know if anybody else wants to make a last comment, fill up the time. It's nice to read your comments in the box. Christina lives down the road. Sybil's really happy. That's wonderful. And I'm sure all of us are ready to face whatever comes, considering that at least we're not being stabbed with knives. I hope that we're not going to be stabbed with knives. And if such a thing should happen, I would trust that your Dhamma practice will mean that you get a very good rebirth. I shouldn't say that, but it's true, right? The thing is, we're all inclining our minds in wholesome ways. So may you all be safe, may you all be well. And may we meet again very soon. Take care. And thank you so much for being here. So we'll unmute you now. We'll stop the recording.